What's going on, everybody? Welcome to my official Shadowlands Arms Warrior PvP guide for patch 9.05. A lot has changed since my last guide with covenants and legendaries, conduits and soulbinds that I wanted to answer some things to better inform you on how to play the class. I know the Arms Warrior is a very popular class right now. Arguably, it's probably the best melee class in the game, and there's a lot of questions to answer. Please don't hate me for making this guide. I'm just trying to answer those questions so I don't have to answer them in the comments. Now, if there's anything that I do not answer in the guide, you can check out my live stream, which will be somewhere here on the screen, and I'd be more than willing to answer your questions there if I missed something in the guide that you wanted to know. There will be timestamps listed below, so you can skip around depending on what part you're interested in. But with that being said, let's hop into it. I'll be covering our covenants first, then our general talents, our PvP talents. I'll then go into stats, legendaries, Soulbinds Conduits, and some general tips and tricks that will better prepare you for playing the class. Okay, hopping into our covenants first, I actually have two warriors. I have a Kyrian warrior and I also have a Venthyr warrior. Now, Necrolord is also a popular choice as it was recently changed, and I'm just going to give you my general thoughts on them and my recommendations. So, Kyrian is my personal favorite for the Arms Warrior. However, if you are new, if you are someone that does a lot of 2v2 arena, if you're pugging a lot of your games, I think you will have much more success on the Venthyr warrior as it does a ton of damage, and Condemn, the ability that you get for playing a Venthyr warrior that replaces your execute, deals shadow damage and it goes through plate, and in 2v2 arena and in a heavy plate meta, that's going to be very, very effective. So I think if you're new or picking up the warrior, most of you will have a lot of fun playing the Venthyr warrior, specifically when you take Death Sentence. However, I like the Kyrian warrior because I play a lot of Ret Warrior 3s with my friend Savix, and I find it to be very nice there. But also you could explore Necrolord and those types of comps. So comps that you might consider taking Kyrian, you'll also have success with the newly redesigned Necrolord banner that gives you and your allies a ton of mastery, which is good for classes like Rets, it's good for classes like Frost DKs, it's good for classes like Feral. So if you're playing those comps in 3v3 arena, you may have some success. But with that being said, you have to have people to play with in order to play those comps. So if you don't have any friends, which I know I can be your friend, but if you don't have any friends, you'll probably have more success playing Venthyr because Necrolord's a bit niche in that way, and Kyrian could be a bit niche in that way, unless you have the Battlelord legendary, which is why I really like Kyrian right now. But all of them are good. Take your pick. As far as Night Fae goes, I don't think it's as good as the other three, but you can still have some success there. Okay, with that being said, I don't want to bore you guys with the general talents, and a lot of the talents and the confusion comes in the PvP talents. So I'm going to go through these rather quickly. There's tons of guides online out there, and you can also check out my previous guide if I didn't cover something in depth here. So level 15, Sudden Death. Level 25, Stormbolt. Level 30, Massacre, unless you're a Kyrian warrior and you queue into heavy plate teams for 2s, sometimes 3s, and you find that you're not dealing enough damage and you don't have Condemn, obviously. Ren can help go through plate. I take this sometimes in 2s when I queue into a Holy Paladin Mirror. If I'm playing Holy Paladin Warrior for 2s and I queue into another Holy Paladin Warrior for 2s, I take Ren because the chances are they're playing Condemn, and I need something to kind of counteract the fact that I don't have Condemn in that matchup. They can go through plate with Condemn. I need something to go through their plate. I take Rend. But the only time I try to use Rend is when I have sweeping strikes up and I'm able, or hoping that they will stack, and I'll try to bring them together by charging over to the healer. The warrior will follow after me, and then I'll use sweeping strikes, and then I'll go for a Rend, and I can get double the value at only the cost of using one Rend, right? I get 2 Rends on the targets with only pressing it once. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, try to min-max your Rend usage with sweeping strikes. Level 35, Defensive Stance, 40 Warbreaker, 45 Avatar, and 50 Dreadnought. I don't take Anger Management. I don't think it's that good. It can have use cases if you're Venthyr and you're dumping a lot of rage, but personally I think Dreadnought is just better for Kyrian, specifically if you're taking Battlelord, and also for Necrolord if you're taking Battlelord, which you probably are. That's the legendary. We'll cover that when we get there. With that being said, now let's hop into our PvP talents where a lot of the confusion will happen, because I know that there's so many options here, and this is really where some of the skill cap and the decisions lie for the Arms Warrior. I'm going to give you some cookie cutter builds, But first, let's talk about the talents that I rarely ever take. Well, I never take Demolition, and I rarely ever take Duel. Duel is something that you can experiment with. It had a lot of value in previous expansions, but in BFA, it was one of your better options. Going into Shadowlands, it's not that effective as you have better talents to choose from. So I really take Duel, really take Death Sentence, and Shadow of the Colossus is one that you'll probably never take outside of 2v2 if you are playing the Battle Lord Kyrian spec. I take this sometimes. When we get to the legendary portion of the video, we'll talk about it, but you'll rarely ever take this, okay? All the other talents you do take. Let's talk about Death Sentence now. If you're playing as a Venthyr warrior, this talent is absolutely insane. It's very good into anything that can kite you. It's very good into mages, hunters, ferals, enhancement shamans when they kite. As a Venthyr warrior, you get so much value out of this when using Condemned, because you can get procs when they're above 80% health. You can get Massacre procs. You can get Sudden Death procs. It gives you that charge execute that's so powerful and really enables the Venthyr warrior to stick on their target. I do take this talent as a Kyrian or on my Kyrian warrior sometimes when I queue into Windwalker monks, when I queue into maybe warlocks as well, if I feel like I don't have any other talent options that sound appealing. But mostly it's a Venthyr warrior talent. Now, with that being said, in keeping that in mind, let's now go into your cookie cutter builds. If you're queuing into Rogue Mage and you're playing a melee cleave specifically and other comps, generally you just want to take survivability talents, talents that will keep you alive. So when I'm playing as a high damage melee cleave, so double melee and a healer, maybe I'm playing Ret Warrior, HPAL, or Frost DK Warrior HPAL, I may not take Sharpened Blade because it's more important for us to survive, and most likely the Rogue Mage Priest, Rogue Mage Paladin, Rogue Mage Druid may just run out of steam, and that's how we'll win. We'll basically win by not losing, if that makes any sense. So in those cases, I will drop Sharpened Blade, and I will take something like Master and Commander. I will take something like War Banner and Disarm. Generally, I'm not a big fan of Overwatch because Overwatch, although it's very good in some cases, the reason why I don't take it is as I'd rather use my Intervene to save one of my allies than using my 30-second CD that lasts for 6 seconds to prevent 1 CC. Because if I don't prevent the CC, let's say I intervene to Overwatch a sheep and the mage pings it off and I don't get it and my healer gets sheeped, well, I just wasted my intervene. So I wouldn't actually recommend this very often, at least for 3s. It's only really good in 2s versus Rogue Mage when I know that they're going to be going me. Also, this talent is really easily replaced by the Misshapen Mirror Legendary, okay? But you can take it. Now, if you are not very experienced at using War Banner, I would just practice with Disarm, maybe Short Rally, and then maybe I would actually take Sharpened Blade into setup comps like Jungle or Rogue Mage until I get more comfortable with all of my abilities, and then I'll add on another skill cap based ability like War Banner, because if you mess up your War Banner or you don't get any value out of it, then it's kind of a wasted talent. So just kind of slowly add on to your toolkit before you throw all of these abilities in there, because you do have a lot of keybinds as the arms were, despite what a lot of players will believe. You have a lot of abilities that you can opt in that you want to keep on your bar, and that can be a little bit overwhelming. So for setup comps, your talents will generally look something like this versus melee cleaves where you just want to survive. Your talents will generally look something like Sharpen, Disarm, and then if you're a Venthyr warrior, you would take Death Sentence. If you're a Kyrian warrior and you're playing the legendary Unhinged, which we'll get into a little bit, you could take Short Blade Storm, or maybe you want to opt to take Big Rally, or maybe you want to opt to take Banner, something like that. So kind of just mess around with these. I know that's a general explanation of them all, but if you have any more questions on your talents, I can kind of give you more info on my stream. All I would keep in mind is if you can take Sharpen, you take it. If you don't need extra talents for survival. If you're a Venthyr warrior and you need mobility, you take Death Sentence, and then you have flex talents depending on what would be most useful. If I'm queuing into an Ellie warrior holy paladin and I want Sharpen, and I'm a Venthyr warrior and I want to use Death Sentence to stick on that Ellie shaman, I have 1 talent left. And if I'm queuing into an Ellie warrior, Disarm probably has the most value. Am I really going to get value out of Banner? Most likely not. Is it better to take a big rally every 2 minutes or take Disarm, which will give me value every 45 seconds to negate that Arms Warrior's burst? So mess around with them and see what would be the most useful to you. And again, if you have any questions, I will be more than willing to answer them on my stream. Okay, so for stats, this is where it can get pretty tricky depending on the covenant you are. Haste and versatility, verse being the primary stat, in my opinion, is the best for Kyrian, and in my opinion, is the best for Necrolord. You could also go for a little bit of verse mastery if you are Kyrian or Necrolord. There are some players that play crit versa, but that is mostly taken when you are playing a Venthyr warrior. As you can see, this is my Venthyr warrior. He's my alt warrior. He's the one I picked up. He's the one that I've picked up recently. I take crit versa, always heavy verse because of the set bonus, and then crit is very, very nice for condemn to get those massive condemns, but you can't go wrong with the mix. And if you already have haste versa gear and you're swapping over to Venthyr, that's fine. And if you want to add some crit pieces along the way, you can do that. If you're playing Venthyr, you can do the heavy verse crit build, but you could also do the heavy verse haste build or a mix. And if you're playing Kyrian or Necrolord, I would go the heavy verse haste build. All right, now hopping into the legendaries, as a lot of these have changed, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions. So in my last guide, I said if you were Kyrian, you wanted to go unhinged because it was the best legendary that you had as a Kyrian warrior, and it worked very well with your spear. This legendary is still good if you already have it. It's still very good into melee cleaves, but since then, Battlelord has been buffed, and Battlelord, in my opinion, is the overall better DPS legendary for Kyrian, especially if you're queuing into maybe you're playing Shadow Priest, Arsham, Arms Warrior. Battlelord can have a lot of value when you're not queuing into other melee cleaves. I think overall, if you're going to craft one legendary and it's your first legendary and you're playing Kyrian or Necrolord, I'd recommend Battlelord. It's very, very fun, specifically if you're doing twos and you take Shadow of the Colossus. You're going to be getting tons of overpower resets with this and tactician resets with this. So you'll have a lot of overpowers that cost no rage, and that's going to reset the cooldown on your Mortal Strike and reduce the rage cost of your Mortal Strike. And it really has this like Fury Warrior style gameplay as an Arms Warrior. I really, really like this legendary. It was recently buffed and it's extremely powerful, and it's a little broken in my opinion, but not that many people realize how strong it is if you don't play the Arms Warrior. So this is what I would make if I was Necrolord or Kyrian first. If I'm a Venthyr warrior, I recommend Exploiter over Battlelord, because although you'll have better rage efficiency when playing Battlelord in those ranges when they're below 80% but not at the 35% range, I think Exploiter overall fits the playstyle better because you'll condemn a couple times, and then when you want to reapply your Mortal Strike to keep your deep wounds and your mortal wounds debuff up, which we'll get to in the tips and tricks portion of the video, it kind of fits the playstyle where you'll condemn twice, and then you have a Mortal Strike, you need to apply it to get your deep wounds up. You'll Mortal Strike, you get the damage buff. This buff to Exploiter never hit live servers for PvP. It only affects PvE, but it's still a very good legendary. So for Kyrian and Necrolord, Battlelord is what I would go to if you don't have Unhinged yet. If you have Unhinged, then just go for this anyway at some point. If you're Venthyr, Exploiter. I don't think Enduring Blow is as good as either of these. If you could equip two legendaries, these two would be insane, but you can't. Now, outside of that, Misshapen Mirror is the one that you want to make next. So if you're starting out, pick a big damage legendary first so you can have some fun, and also so you can kind of work your way up the ladder and start dealing good damage. Then grab Misshapen Mirror, as this is very effective in so many matchups. It's good versus Rogue Mage. It's good versus Shadow Priest, specifically to really negate their mind games. It's good into Warlocks. It's good into so many different things. You really will want this legendary, specifically when you do threes or even twos and you find a teammate and you're in voice together. You can really, really negate a lot of goes with Misshapen Mirror. So you want to make a DPS one first and then Misshapen. And then some people are going to ask me about Sephuz as an Orc Warrior. Yes, this stun reduction stacks with your Orc racial. However, I know this is kind of weird to say, but I feel like this is the most real advice. If you're someone that's low rated or you're trying to work your way up the ladder, sometimes the games are much faster than they are when you're playing at higher rating, right? Because people know how to effectively trade cooldowns. Maybe you're in voice and you've been working together with these players for a long time. You'll know how to trade CDs more effectively and the games will go much longer. But at lower rating, what I've found is that the games are much shorter because, you know, you've never played with these people before. You're not in voice. People are going to be messing up their CDs all over the place. Sefus won't have that much value in a short game. You're better off picking a high damage legendary because the first go you might trinket, the second go your healer might trinket, and then the game is over. So I don't recommend Sefus over any of these other legendaries first, even if you're an Orc Warrior. Now, as you get more, higher and higher rated, you probably won't even need to watch my guide anymore, and you might make a Sefus. But don't make Sefus first. Okay, first of all, it's not I made it first on my Venthyr Warrior. It's not a fun legendary. It's kind of boring. You barely notice it. You get a little bit of stats. You want to have fun. I know what the average player probably wants, and they want to have fun, and I don't think you'll even have as much value taking this at lower rating. So, those are my recommendations. If you already have Unhinged, go for Misshapen next. If you don't have Unhinged, go for Battlelord, then Misshapen if you're Kyrian or Necrolord, that is. And if you're Venthyr, it's Exploiter, then Misshapen, and then you can mess around with Sefus. All right, now hopping into Soulbinds, I'm going to show you my Kyrian Soulbinds, and then I will also show you on the screen my Venthyr recommendation Soulbinds. And if you're a Necrolord, I will also show you what I would go as Necrolord. Okay, so Kyrian Pelagos is your main DPS tree, and when I take Pelagos, I take Mortal Combo, I go left, I take Stalwart Guardian. This conduit is ridiculous, so you want to try to get this one as soon as you can. Crash the Ramparts, very, very good. Specifically, you're playing Battlelord, and then you want to have Safeguard, and then you go down, obviously, down here. Sometimes I take this route if I don't feel like I need Mortal Combo and I'm not going to have a lot of uptime, and I try to take this if I do take the big rally talent, Master and Commander. Sometimes I have value taking this, but generally this will be my path when I play Pelagos. And then for setup-based comps, I like Mechanicos. Okay, Mechanicos, I'm playing it just to be as durable as possible. This is my Rogue Mage setup when I queue into Rogue Mage in 2s or 3s because of Sparkling Drift Globe Core. This thing is ridiculous. It procs when you hit 35% health, it stuns everyone around you, it really disrupts the rogue go, allows you to get out of smoke bombs, disrupts the Shadow Dance cheap shot spam, and it will auto proc your file as well. You get Crash the Ramparts that gives you some damage, you get a larger rally, you get Stalwart Guardian, and you get Safeguard. Safeguard is also a very, very strong conduit that I try to take no matter what I'm doing. Okay, so this is my setup for Kyrian. I will also show you what I would go if I was playing Venthyr. You essentially have Naja, and then you have Draven. Same ideology there. If you're going Naja, that's your DPS tree. If you're going Draven, that's your DPS tree. And then if you're going Necrolord, it's the same concept. You want to take conduits for a DPS style game where you want to have as much pressure, and then you want to take conduits or have a setup for when you're trying to just focus on living. So essentially the same ideology. Works in any Covenant tree that you have. You want to make sure that you have at least Safeguard in one of them. You always want to have Stalwart Guardian. Crash the Ramparts as your potency conduit first, and then Mortal Combo is great when you're really trying to pump. Oh, also really quickly, it's very cool that as a warrior, you get Crash the Ramparts and Stalwart Guardian from the PvP vendor. The only one that you'll really want to go grab from the raid is Safeguard, but you can get that from LFR. So you can queue up LFR, get this pretty easily. And you can also knock these out from the PvP vendor as well. Okay, now hopping into the tips and tricks portion of the video. I know a lot of people will meme or make fun of you if you play the warrior, but that's because the warrior is really strong right now. But I would say the warrior has a lot of key bindings, and if you're a new player, that can be very daunting. I know it looks like I don't have a lot of buttons, but I have a lot of macros that are hiding a lot of my abilities, and there's also abilities that are hidden over here that I don't even show. And there are also abilities that are not talented into, but I keep them on my bar because sometimes you play a mix, and that can be pretty confusing. So the warrior, although is easy to deal damage, the skill cap in the warrior comes from how supportive you are as the warrior. So we're gonna go over some general tips really quickly. Number one, the biggest mistake that every single warrior I coach, I watch play, when they send me gameplay, is they do not keep hamstring up. You need to get so comfortable using hamstring that you're over applying it at first. When you charge and connect to a target, first global is always hamstring. Because if you do not have hamstring on the target, you are not staying on the target, and you are not getting the autos off that you need to develop or gain more rage. So you want to make sure that you are keeping hamstring on the target, because if he walks away, you're not getting the autos and you're not getting the rage. So religiously apply hamstring, and you'll use your piercing howl, your AoE slow, to allow you to reapply hamstring if they're just out of range for the hamstring. So AoE slow, and then you'll reapply hamstring. If people are running past you and they're trying to push onto your healer, you'll use your AoE slow so you can slow them coming in and then apply hamstring. Very, very important to keep this up over anything else. The next important debuff or buff that you want to keep on the enemy is going to be deep wounds and mortal wounds, your mortal strike effect. This is going to give you increased damage, deep wounds, it's your mastery, on all of your attacks. So the way you apply this is by using mortal strike. So you want to keep hamstring up, and then you want to keep deep wounds up. After that, you're kind of set to do anything else that you want. Just don't forget those two debuffs. Always apply MS, part of your rotation. Always keep up hamstring so you can keep them slowed, okay? Other important things that you want to keep rolling, obviously you want to have your battle shout up before the game starts, but ignore pain is one that you want to keep up as much as possible, which is why I really enjoy playing the Kyrian Warrior and playing Battle Lord, is because it allows me to really have the most rage possible. Condemn can really suck the rage out of your character. You'll be rage starved at some points, but you're doing so much damage to make up for it that it's hard to keep up ignore pain, but you want to rotate that in. Too often do I see warriors not apply ignore pain, and they're taking all of this unnecessary damage for free. It's a partial absorb. It gives you an absorb where 50% of the damage you take will go into ignore pain, and once that absorb falls off, you lose ignore pain. So keep that debuff or that buff on you rolling at all times. Keep hamstring, keep mortal wounds, okay? You'll be much tankier if you do that. Let's quickly talk about a few key things about the warrior in terms of your survivability. Defensive stance along with ignore pain is very powerful, okay? You want to use defensive stance when you are traveling to a target and you don't have a surefire way of getting there. There's no reason to be in battle and getting rotted down by dots or range attacks. Try to mitigate some of the damage that you take. That's how you are so durable as a warrior, is that you can have this 20% damage reduction buff on you whenever you choose so. So staying in D stance as you're traveling to things is very good. When your healer gets put into any CC, go into D stance. If you don't have a lot of damage rolling at that time, go into D stance. However, you want to avoid going into D stance if possible because you're dealing 20% less damage in PvP. Although it says it's 10% less damage on the tooltip, if you zone into PvP, you will see that you are dealing 20% less damage. It's nerfed in PvP. So you want to make sure that you are maximizing your damage if possible. If you're not being targeted, you can really direct the pace of the fight. Meaning, if they're training your healer, don't sit in D stance and deal 20% less damage for no reason. Come out of D stance and start applying pressure to make them go back onto you. And then if you're in trouble or you want to save some of your healer's mana, or if he's trying to recover, go into D stance. Okay? The next important tip I want to talk about is intervene. This ability is the most broken thing I would say in the game right now. Intervene is a 30-second CD that will redirect all physical and ranged physical attacks back to you. Not spells, but physical attacks. So hunter abilities and things like that. It also can intervene interrupts. So rogue kicks, warrior pummels, feral interrupts, things like that. You can intervene off your healer. So if I intervene a target, my healer can't be interrupted by a rogue, for example. You can also eat kidney shots, cheap shots, saps. You can intervene a ton of abilities with intervene. One of the things you have to remember though is that when you intervene, it's very good to have ignore pain up or apply ignore pain once you've intervened to kind of mitigate some of that damage or go into D stance. That way you're redirecting damage towards you and you're also reducing the amount of damage that they're dealing by having it go through ignore pain and defensive stance, right? Very important there. One of the things that you can also do that you'll see a lot of warriors do is they will intervene a target during another class's burst. So let's say you're playing as a melee cleave. Let's say another warrior runs over to your healer. He pops all of his burst. So this warrior presses Avatar. He war breakers. He's ready to do all of his damage. You can intervene your healer, go into D, intervene your healer, and then pop your parry And since the attacks are being redirected to you, you can parry them. So you can pretty much give them a bop. You're immuning the damage and negating their entire go. And with Stalwart Guardian, that defensive conduit, it's very, very effective there. Very, very, very effective there just to mitigate all of that burst. So that's something to keep in mind. Also intervening when you have conduit safeguard, you're also making so they take 13% less damage. So it also works with spells as well. And if you're playing Overwatch, you can have value there by redirecting or reflecting spells. So that's something to keep in mind. Generally, your burst is very simple, and this is not the skill capped of the warrior. If you're playing Kyrian and you're playing Unhinged, I talked about this in my previous guide. I will have a link below on how to do the Unhinged burst as a Kyrian warrior, or maybe you're doing it as a Necrolord warrior. That will be timestamped and linked below. But your burst is very simple, whether you're playing Spear or not. It's Avatar, Warbreaker, and then maybe if targets are stacked, you'll Sweeping Strikes, and you'll just do your rotation. You want to use MS first, execute if it ever procs. As long as you have this buff up, then you can press execute. Make sure you keep this rolling. And then Overpower is the one ability that you want to be pressing as much as you can, as it gives you the ability to deal damage at no rage cost. So it can help you build up your rage pool so you can spam it to ignore pains. It's very, very good value to be using Overpower. And the other thing that I want to mention here though, Slam is not an ability that you want to press. I get this question a lot. When do I use Slam? Slam sucks. You don't want to press Slam. MS is way more value. Obviously, Overpower is way more value. And if you have nothing to press, like you have Ignore Pain, I'm in this scenario, maybe I'll throw out a couple slams, right? But I'd much rather make sure that I have the rage for my Mortal Strike before I dump all of my rage into my slam, right? This is a misplay if I've dumped all my rage into my slam and then I have no rage to get my MS up again, right? You don't want to be in this scenario right here. This is a bad scenario to be in. Okay, MS on cooldown, hardest hitting ability outside of Condemn or Execute. Overpower as your filler, Ignore Pain always rolling, and then Slam if you have nothing to press, which is very, very rarely the case. I just have it on my bars. Couple quick warrior setups, very simple. If you have your burst, usually you want to pair your Stormbolt and your Fear, so you can Fear the healer, Stormbolt the target, charge over, and pop your burst while that target's in a Fear. Okay, that's a typical warrior setup. Fear the healer or the off target and Stormbolt your killed target. You can also use Fear defensively, where you know that they're going your healer, or you know that this team is popping all of their bursts. Maybe you're fighting a mage and you know he has Combust, or a hunter's popped his resonating arrow. You can Fear that to kind of mitigate some of that damage, specifically or especially if they have no trinket. That has a lot of value. And then the rest of your abilities are abilities that you don't want to just press for funsies. I always say this. So don't spell reflect for no reason. Try to time it. If you don't need a berserker rage something instantly, you don't always have to press it. Don't Sweeping Strikes for no reason. I should touch on this as well. This ability is ridiculous. It's one of your best abilities as a warrior. If you can ever get Sweeping Strikes value where you can get 2 targets to stack, take the opportunity to do that because you're dealing so much more damage. Don't just press this because it's there. Time it well. Time your spell reflex. Time your piercing howls. Use them to set things up for you. Don't ever get caught out of D stance. If you have no trinket, be aware of that. And if there's anything else that I didn't cover specifically in this guide, there will be a timestamp or a link to a timestamp in my previous guide where I really break down a lot of the other abilities. So I didn't want to spend too much time on all of these abilities because I did cover it in my last guide pretty extensively. It was more than half the guide. If you guys have any more questions about the warrior, you'll probably have to test it out for yourself and then head over to my live stream so you can ask more specific questions there. And I'd be more than willing to answer your questions there. I hope you guys found this guide useful. I hope you found it informative, and I hope you found it entertaining. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.